Welcome to NewsNow, your highlights of the week's news and views. In NewsNow this week, the Dalai Lama called off the trip he'd hoped to make to South Africa, and suddenly a lot of people were rather hot under the collar. Why all the fuss over a man from a very small country on the other side of the world? A man who has a title, but apparently no name. Well, he's a friend of one of South Africa's favorite citizens, Archbishop Desmond Tutu. You know, call me the Arch, and was invited to celebrate the Arch's 80th birthday. And like many other people, the Dalai Lama needed a visa to get into South Africa. But the government's bureaucrats took their time deciding whether or not to allow him in, even though he's seen around the world as a symbol of peace, justice, and non-violence. Clearly, it was because China doesn't like the things he says about human rights, and because lots of South African bigwigs were in Beijing about the same time, bowing and smiling to get China to invest its billions here. So let's not upset our paymaster, no matter their dismal record on human rights or what our constitution says on the subject. Well, count us in, and all of you, of course. It's census time. Across the country, you'll soon have people knocking on your door and identifying themselves as census enumerators working for Statistics South Africa. They'll be wearing yellow bibs and will produce official ID cards, and they'll ask you various questions about yourself and your household. Why is this being done, especially at a cost of 4 billion rand? After all, that money could build 20 schools or employ 29,000 junior nurses for a year. Counting the population is not a new thing. It's an exercise that's been carried out over many centuries. Knowing or assessing how many people exist in a country allows the government to plan more effectively where and how to allocate its spending. So when you hear the knock, please cooperate. Of course, be cautious and be courteous. Mandela Mbeki Zuma. The names are familiar enough. They're South Africa's first 3 elected presidents since the start of a new democratic era. But who's next? President Jacob Zuma became head of the ANC after some decidedly nasty domestic fights within the party that saw Mbeki effectively being told to go. And Zuma was in the thick of those fights. Now, ironically or perhaps inevitably, he's having to watch his back because wanting to be the boss is, after all, the mud wrestling part of party politics. Lines are being drawn, alliances being forged or bought, dirty tricks are no doubt being planned. And all eyes are on the big ANC conference next year. Will President Zuma survive the battle to secure another presidential term? Read about it in NewsNow.
She was a carefree American student in Italy, enjoying a life of parties, drugs, wild sex, and murder. That's what Italian police claimed after her British flatmate was raped and stabbed to death. Amanda Knox was put on trial with her Italian boyfriend, convicted of the murder and sentenced to 26 years in jail. But she insisted she and her boyfriend were innocent. Finally, an appeal court and jury agreed. So after more than 1,000 days in an Italian prison, Amanda Knox is free and home again in Seattle, and likely to get very rich from the book and film contracts being offered to her.
NewsNow, the magazine for busy people, on sale now.